What I really want to talk to you about is what's the punchline of the conversation you're having with yourself right now with what you're dealing with. You know, I think what I see happening overall, so just for context for the room, VaynerX, the company that I run, as you can see, has a lot of businesses in it. Obviously, VaynerMedia works with the Pepsis and the Procter & Gambles and things of that nature, and that's gonna have a very different strategy and mindset than a lot of people in this room. But the Sasha Group, if you see it there on the screen, that's named after my dad, Sasha, and that is an agency that works with SMBs and businesses that generate $500,000 to $10 million. And that's been probably the most exciting part for me over the last 9 months because the stakes are so much higher. When Coca-Cola loses a little market share, it is what it is. You know, when we lose 20, 30, 40, 50% market share, it's a huge impact on our actual life. And I grew up in a family business environment. I was born in the Soviet Union. I moved to the States when I was a kid, and I eventually worked for my dad's liquor store. He lived his American dream from going from a stock boy to owning a liquor store, which was remarkable. And when I was 14, since I was the oldest in the family, you get dragged into the liquor store. I was doing great, by the way, if you were wondering. I was making $2,000 to $3,000 a weekend selling baseball cards in the malls of New Jersey back in 1989, which I don't know how many of you have $3,000 or $7,000 or $15,000 when you're 13, but when you have $3,000 or $7,000 or $13,000 when you're 13, you're basically a fucking billionaire. So I was living good. I loved life. And then one day I turned 14 and my dad dragged my ass into the liquor store and says, "You work here now." And I was like, how much are you gonna pay me? And he said, $2 an hour. And that's a far cry from making $1,000 a weekend selling sports cards. I don't know how many of you have a Soviet father, but there wasn't much of a negotiation. So at 14, I started to go down the path of the context that I think we share, which is a business that is in the realms of under $10 million a year take home, things of that nature, that world. And that is really the foundation of how I see the world, right? And so when I sit here and I think about multiple things that people here are going through. Actually, how many people here run a shop that has more than 10 employees? Raise your hand. Good, about half. Like that is a totally different dynamic as you start getting into double-digit management of people. There's a whole nother layer of just not outflanking. It's what I know half of this room's thinking about, motivating, retaining, feeding all them out, like the whole dynamics. And so, you know, I come here today with a very practical energy of trying to hope that in a room of this many people, that 3% of this room actually finally hears what I'm saying. Because unlike 2009 when I started to talk about these things, or 2006 even, when I started talking about these things, there's nobody, you know, in 2009 I was like, you should be on Twitter, and you would be in the crowd and be like, he's a fucking genius. It was like profound, like what does that even mean? You know, it was like this like thing. Nobody here today in 2023 is confused that human beings' attention sits on social media at scale. Everybody has an opinion of that. Unfortunately, many people here deploy their human opinion when thinking about your actual business. The consumer you're trying to reach to sell your service to is really not super interested on your hot take of what 13-year-olds are doing on TikTok. They're not super intrigued by how much you like or dislike Facebook. They just live their life, see things, and spend their money. And so there's so many things to talk about in this room. First and foremost is a very simple question that everybody needs to ask themselves. That is, here's a good one. By show of hands, who here would like to grow their business this year? I'm just curious. Please raise your hand. Just look, all right, solid, good, thank you. A little weirded out by a couple that didn't raise their hand. Have no clue why you're here. In that world, wouldn't it make sense to actually try to execute on the reality of what the consumer's doing? I'm aware that, look, you know, when I look around this room, and again, I think you'll appreciate, I hope you appreciate this, I'm aware that a lot of you have done this for a while and have built an actual network and great reputation in your general region and are building and have built your business on doing the right thing, being a good person, working hard, and building on word of mouth. I appreciate that. What I think a lot of you who've lived through other soft markets, because when I look in this crowd, there's youngsters in this crowd who haven't lived through it yet. Some of the OGs here rolling up to get a cup of coffee at this conference, see somebody under 30, they're like, kid, you don't even understand what happened in 2008 was a motherfucker. Right? That, we know that, right? Here's where it gets tricky. When we go through up and down cycles, for a lot of people that just raised their hand and went through it, at the time, they had less to lose. At the time, they had no choice. At the time, they were the young buck, and as a matter of fact, they actually used 2008 to actually accelerate the growth of their business. The problem is, it's now 2023, and it's different for those people that navigated 2008. They're in a different life cycle. They're a little more bougie. Their overhead's a little higher. They don't go to the Holiday Inn on their vacation anymore, right? And now they're caught, because they're softer. And so it's not as fun to do the things that they had to do in 08, because it was much more fun to do the things they did in 19 because it was easier. See, I love 2023. I love what we're sitting through right now in this room. This is when we separate people who have stomach for it and people who don't. We all know that there's a lot of people that entered this business in 2016, 15 that aren't gonna make it through because they only trained in the softness. They don't like the dirt. They don't like the grind. I don't think anybody here is gonna like what's about to come out of my mouth. In the deepest of my heart, with enormous compassion, empathy, and deep want for happiness in everybody in this room, I want every single person here posting 12 different creative posts across 5 different social networks a day. I want every person in this room after this conference, after this talk, to go home tomorrow and post somewhere between 8 and 15 pieces of content on LinkedIn, YouTube Shorts, Facebook, Instagram, Snap, TikTok, and I want you to do it every day. What I just said is 100%. It's non-debatable fact that the people that are outflanking in every micro segment of every business in the output of creative, and of course the quality matters. Of course the quality of what comes out of your mouth is a variable of your success. But before you even start the debate of what do you say, or what are you talking about, or how are you doing this, the data is undeniable that the companies and humans in service businesses that are outposting its competitive set are picking up market share by the simple fact of there's just too much attention of society on these 7 to 10 platforms. So it's just classic, right? Like every single person here knows how to get into better shape. There's not a person in this room that does not understand that it is a combination of eating better and going to the gym. I think we can all agree, not everyone in this room is doing that, right? I struggled with that for 40 years. 38 years, I never wanted to do either. And then I just, one day on a plane decided this is not gonna end up well, and I started working on it. 9 years later, 8 years later, I still never wanna do it a single day. I'm being really serious. There's not a single, I literally hired a full-time human being to be my babysitter and travel. I'm being dead serious. I got to the financial level where I finally figured it out. I'm very good at being accountable to others. To my family, I'm a good boss because I think I work for them, not them for me. That's a whole nother thing for the people with the 10 employees. By the way, I'll go real fast here. You have 10 or more employees, I'll give you one sentence that will disproportionately help you through this window. You work for them, not the other way around. You get into that mindset, it gets real good real fast. If you actually care about them, not what they are supposed to do for you, it gets real good real fast. That's being an actual boss. You know, the reason I stand here and I'm putting this framework up and I want to use this health comp is, I don't, just because it comes natural to me to do 10 posts a day, I know that for 80% of this room, it does not. But just like the journey I went on, which is, I didn't want to die at 65. I thought it would be better to live longer. I like it. I'm doing something every day for 9 straight years that I genuinely hate. Genuinely. Brian, when I wake up every morning, I'm like, this sucks. Like I don't want to do it every day. And so I don't care how much you hate social media. I don't care that you've decided it's ruined the world and the kids and the this and the that and I genuinely don't care. Because your customer doesn't care. It doesn't care what you think of it. I just desperately need you to stop losing market share. Because if you're not gonna do it, somebody else is. And those referrals are great and they'll keep you going, but I don't have to explain to anybody here that if you don't get more, it's eventually gonna run out.